Good morning and welcome to the Smart Cities Colloquium. My name is Joe Zika. I'm a member of the National Academies staff of the Intelligence Community Studies Board. This is the 9th colloquium in our series with the ODNI. And before I introduce representatives from both of those organizations, I need to make a couple of administrative announcements. One is this colloquium in its entirety is unclassified. Please help yourself to refreshments over on the side, and if you need something more substantial, there's a nice cafeteria two floors above us, 3rd level. The restrooms are outside these doors. Turn right and then turn immediate right down the hallway. They're right there on the edge. The bios are in your program. If you don't have a printed program, they're out in the front desk. And one notice, on the panel session, we would like to have people on the webcast get their questions to us. So if those people would send their questions to me at my National Academy email, which is jczika@nas.edu, and probably Nate can project that at some point. And during the panel session, unless you have a question, during the presentations of the talks, unless you have a question of clarification, I would prefer that you wait more intensive questions and answers and comments to the panel session where you can have more time to express yourself. And if you need anything at all, ask myself or Nate, Deb, a voice in the back, and we will be happy to accommodate you. I would like to introduce to extend a welcome from the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine, I would like to introduce Dr. Alan Shaw. Alan is the director of the Intelligence Community Studies Board. Prior to that current position, he held a number of distinguished positions in government and industry. And so we're happy to have him here this morning. Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Joe. Good morning, everybody. As Joe said, I'm Alan Shaw, the director of the Intelligence Community Studies Board. I look around the room, I see some familiar faces and a lot that I don't recognize. So as Joe said, my task is to welcome you on behalf of the National Academies to this colloquium, the most recent in this series sponsored by ODNI. So I just did that. I've also been told that my task is to tell you about the history of the National Academies. We're born during a national existential crisis, the Civil War. We're housed in time for the next existential crisis, which is the Great Depression, followed by World War II, and then called to order, in a sense, in the period of continuing crises and problems that followed pretty hard on from World War II, the defining separation being perhaps the destruction of Hiroshima, a moment which is defining for both the scientific community and the national security community. So for those of you who have heard this before, I'm not going to go through the history of the academies, and I won't bore you with hearing it yet again. For those of you who haven't, our website does a lot better job than I can ever do, so please, I invite you to go and read that. Sorry, I've got the wrong glasses on. I'd like to start by saying that we in the science, engineering, medicine community share a very important common basis with the intelligence community. These are both enterprises that are based on fact, logic, objectivity, speaking truth to power. And that's been brought into sharp focus, the events of the last few years, which I don't have to remind you about. And we all come to understand now as a slap in the face that these values are not necessarily universally accepted. So there's a common cause among these communities and several other communities, obviously, within the country. So we're moving together closer together in a general sense. So the Academy, our slogan is that we are advisors to the nation. And of course, from a practical perspective, being advisors to the nation means that we have to be advisors to the government, and a large part of the government is the national security community. The intelligence community has always been an internal set of advisors to the government, to the national security community, and in the last few years has been building on the fact that it also needs to extend beyond that and become advisors to our country as a whole, supplier of important information and so on. So on to today's topic. So over the past couple of decades, both communities have issued reports that have had the statement that most of the world's population will be living in cities. This is either profound or obvious, or perhaps both, depending on your point of view. So it's kind of like the classic statement of the bank robber who was asked why he robs banks. He said, because that's where the money is. Or the man who was surprised to learn that he was speaking prose. So I also noticed as a footnote that those last two are no longer true. The money is no longer in the banks, and we don't speak prose. We speak what Robin Williams termed putting the English language in a Cuisinart and see what comes out the other end. But we do have to deal with the basic fact that the world's population is becoming increasingly urbanized. And because of that, the cities are experiencing all sorts of difficulties. Consider the one we're in now. You'll see people continue to drift in because they're stuck in traffic out there. This Washington, D.C. is an 18th century design, a 19th century creation, afflicted with a 20th century disease for which it is trying to get out, but is in fact getting farther into problems here. And this is actually, by world standards, a small city and a rich one. So consider the problems that we're going to be addressing in part in today's colloquium. And we're talking about, therefore, an important area of emerging technologies with profound implications, which is smart cities. So luckily for you, I'm not a substantive commentator on this topic, so I'm going to get off the podium. I'd like to introduce Dan Flynn, who welcome on behalf of the intelligence community and the Director of National Intelligence in particular. His bio is available, but I've come to know Dan in the last year or so and been very impressed with his capabilities and credentials. He is the first director of the Intelligence Community Net Assessments Division. This is a big deal and a big leap forward for the way the intelligence community operates. He's got a hard job to deal with. He took that job just last August. He's responsible for developing forecasts and comparative assessments to identify emerging challenges and opportunities for the intelligence capability. He has been director of the Global Securities Program for the National Intelligence Council and many other distinguished positions, which I won't read to you, but I would strongly encourage you to go look up Dan's background. And it's my pleasure to introduce Dan Flynn.
Thanks, Alan. Thank you for that kind introduction. And I want to thank the National Academies and the IC Studies Board for hosting us today and all the speakers in the academic community for supporting it. When Alan Shaw first invited me to do the opening remarks, I thought of the story about George Bernard Shaw, which I don't think is a relation, when he invited Winston Churchill to one of his opening of his play. And some of you may know George Bernard Shaw really couldn't stand Winston Churchill. So it was a surprise to Winston Churchill when he saw in the Morning Post a letter from Shaw saying, "My dear Mr. Churchill, I would like to invite you to my opening show of my new play, Pygmalion, and I've included 2 tickets, one for you and one for a friend." And then Shaw added, "if you have one." Well, Churchill, never to be outdone, immediately sent back a response. "My dear Mr. Shaw, thank you for the tickets. Unfortunately, I can't come to the first showing, but I will come to the second, if there is one." So, unlike Churchill, though, I am proud and happy to be here at this event. A little bit more about my background. I'm from the Directorate of Strategy Engagement in the Office of Director of National Intelligence. And it's our job to identify and develop and articulate the path forward for the U.S. intelligence community. And we do this by engaging on certain bets that we place on strategic initiatives that will hopefully address enduring challenges and emerging issues confronting the U.S. intelligence. But however, before we can prepare for this future, we first have to understand where we're heading. And that's my job as Director of ICNet Assessments, is to determine what those challenges we will face in the future, as well as potential opportunities that are coming along in the next 10 or 20 years or so. And to do this, we hope to assist our senior leadership in making more informed decisions about where we should be going and what capabilities we need to invest in and what strategies we need to develop, plan for the future. And to help think about the future, we collaborate with the National Academies through the IC Studies Board. And the IC Studies Board convenes various workshops and colloquiums like this one to get experts' opinions on emerging issues in science and technology to help us think through what would be important and of interest in the intelligence community. So today, as you all know, we're here to talk about smart cities. The question is, what makes a city smart? And looking through the literature, different people take different perspectives. Some focus on the technologies, right? Smart cities have to have 5G technologies, Internet of Things, sensors, networks, to do all sorts of important things to make it easier to manage resources more effectively. Others focus on the outcomes. See, the IEEE says a smart city brings together technology, government, and society to enable the following characteristics: smart economy, smart mobility, smart environment, smart people, smart living, smart governance, which just begs a whole next set of questions. However, I personally like what the Department of Business and Innovation Skills in the UK came up with. It focuses on the process, and it actually says that smart city is not a static concept. There is no endpoint. There's no absolute definition. Rather, it's a process, a series of steps by which cities become more livable, more resilient, and hence able to respond more effectively to new challenges. So whatever definition you prefer, it's important that we understand this process, not only because most of us will be living differently in very fundamental ways as these technologies come online and these smart cities begin to emerge, but it's also important to understand what might be the new national security issues and the privacy issues these smart cities present to us. And in particular, for the OD&I, it's important to understand the impact of these developments because it will shape the environment which the IC has to operate with in the future. So therefore, I'm looking forward to your presentations today and for continuing further engagement on this topic. So thank you very much. And back to Joe.